Hi everybody, I'm Xavier from AeroCoach, and in this video we're going to run through what to expect when you turn up to a UCI TT in terms of the dimensions your bike has to conform to, the sorts of things you'll experience on race day, and tips and tricks to make sure that your bike is fully set up within UCI regulations. When you turn up to a UCI TT, you'll encounter a UCI jig. This is the latest version of the jig, and it has inbuilt settings to enable the commissaires at the event to ensure that your bike complies with the regulations. The first thing to understand is that you may only be able to use the jig right on the start line before you head to your race. Sometimes you're able to check your bike on the jig beforehand, but don't necessarily expect that this is always the case. So it's really important to make sure that you have your bike set up within the regulations so that when you get to the start line and you only have a few minutes to go before your race and the commissaire ticks your bike off, that everything's fine and you don't have to make any adjustments last minute. Your bike will be placed into this slot by the commissaire. Now, if you're getting your bike checked before the competition, make sure that both tyres are inflated, because this may change the angle of the bike if one of them is slightly less inflated. And the back axle will sit like that, and the front wheel will go in. You'll then step back, and then the commissaire will check your bike. The next thing that's going to happen is we're going to set the 0 bottom bracket point. You can see this laser line here. This will be taken down and then set to the center of the bottom bracket axle. And this is effectively the baseline point from which all other measurements are taken. The commissaire will press 0 bottom bracket, and now everything's zeroed, ready to check all the other components. The first component we're going to measure is the saddle, and the location of the saddle is going to really determine what happens at the handlebars, which is why we do it first. We will take the laser measure, and then using either this tool, or sometimes the commissaires may ask you to hold up a piece of paper behind the saddle to show where the laser is. But we'll take the tool and we'll put it on the saddle, and this tells us where the tip of the saddle is relative to the bottom bracket. So in this example, the point of the laser is just here, and you can see that the tip of the saddle is 54 millimeters behind the bottom bracket. They'll press a button, and then that's green, and that's set as the saddle position. There are two saddle positions that we're going to be concerned about when we're looking for UCI regulations. If the saddle is 50 millimeters or more behind the bottom bracket, we call this the rearwards position. And if it's less than 50 millimeters, so 0 to 49 millimeters behind the bottom bracket, then that's the forwards position. You can't have your saddle for UCI time trials in front of the bottom bracket. The other measurement for the saddle is that it can't be more than plus or minus 9 degrees. So just ensure that it's within the angle and that you know which of these positions it's in, either the forwards position or the rearwards position. Now, at the front of the bike with the extensions, you're going to have 3 options depending on your UCI height category. So height category 1 is for people up to 179.9 centimeters tall. Height category 2 is for people from 180.0 to 189.9 centimeters, and height category 3 is for people who are 190.0 or above. In order to make sure that you're eligible for these height categories, you need to have your height registered with the UCI, which you can do on the UCI website. You only need to do this for categories 2 and 3. If you don't have your height registered, then your bike will be measured under UCI height category 1, and you also need to make sure that you have a sticker on your bike explaining what your height category is. This is most important for categories 2 and 3. If you're category 1, you don't necessarily have to worry, because your bike will just be measured under those categories if you're not on the list and if you don't have the sticker. So now we know your saddle location and what height category you're in, we can work on the extensions. If you have your saddle in the forwards position, so 0 to 49 millimeters behind the bottom bracket, then the tip of your extensions here cannot be more than 75 centimeters in front of the bottom bracket, regardless of your height category. If you have your saddle in the rearwards position, then this number changes. For height category 1, you can have the ends of your extensions up to 80 centimeters in front of the bottom bracket. For height category 2, it can be 83, and for height category 3, it can be 85 centimeters. There is also a height specification from the tips of the shifters down to your armrests, and this can be for category 1 100 millimeters, for category 2, 120 millimeters, and for category 3, 140 millimeters. In order to measure the reach on the extensions with the jig, this section will be moved forwards, and you can see how the laser pointer here is going to just go past where the tips of the extensions are, like this. We check what the reach is. Ooh. We press E on there. It was 751, which is over 750, but because this rider is in height category 2, it can be up to 830, so it's gone green and everything's fine. So now we're going to measure the extension height. This rider is in height category 2, so that means that we need a 120 height. We place this tool, the tip of that, in the center of the armrest here, and then with the digital spirit level, we'll then check to see that it's level, and as long as it's perfectly level and the shifters aren't touching the tool, then you're absolutely fine. One thing to bear in mind is that you will be measuring the highest point of the extensions, which is normally the shifters, but if you have a computer that comes up too high, the commissaires will measure to the top of the computer as well. So make sure your computer's installed so you don't have any problems. Now there's a few smaller considerations you need to make sure of when setting up your bike for UCI regulations, and one of them is making sure that there's a gap in between your wheels and the frame. So with the prevalence of wider tyres now, if you have a tyre that's too large and your wheel is too close to the frame, it could cause a safety issue with something getting caught and your wheel getting locked up. So there's a UCI regulation that says that you need to be able to pass a credit card in between your wheel and the frame, just like this. And as long as you can do that front and back at all points on the frame, then your bike's absolutely fine. There's another smaller regulation around where your armrests can be. Now this is more for the shorter riders, but you need to ensure that the front of your armrest isn't within 180 millimeters of the tip of the extension. So you can't have your armrest very far forwards. There has to be a minimum distance of 180. On this bike it's around 230 millimeters, so that would pass. There's also a regulation around the angle of your armrests. Now this can be up to 30 degrees from horizontal. So it used to be 15 degrees, now it can be up to 30 degrees, so just make sure that you stay within those limits. Lastly, we need to make sure that your frame itself is compliant with UCI regulations in terms of tube dimensions and things. Now the easiest way to know if this is the case is the UCI sticker here. So just make sure that this is not obscured so the commissaires can check and ensure your frame is completely legal. Now, of course, not everybody has a UCI jig at home, so you're going to have to do some of these measurements yourself. One of the easiest ways of doing it is finding a straight edge, so this could be a door jamb or something at home, where you can line up your bottom bracket with a perfectly straight section of wall or door, and then you can take the measurements off this. So here you can see that I'm measuring the tip of my saddle to where the bottom bracket line is, and that is over 50, which is fine for the rearwards position. And then you can take your tape measure off that straight section up to the extensions, and here we can see that we're still within regulations there, and that's no problem at all. It is very, very important that if you are going to do these measurements yourself, get a friend to help you, double check everything, and we recommend that you set everything a couple of millimeters back from where you think the limit is so that you don't have any problems on race day when the bike goes in the official jig. Okay, so there we are. That's how to set your bike up for UCI regulations. Some of the small tips and tricks to ensure your bike is completely within all of the limits, the sorts of things you can do at home, and also what to expect on race day. If you have any questions, then let us know, and we'll see you at the races.